So I hate to admit it, but I'm stuck with an iPhone. I've been an iPhone user for a very long time, but I've always been envious of those who own an Android cuz it seems like there's a lot more you can do with Android versus iOS. It feels more customizable, it seems to have more variety of apps, but the big thing off the top of my head that wasn't so easily doable in iOS until recently was emulation. I, for one, am big into emulation of retro games because, one, collecting has become extremely expensive over the years, and I don't have a great budget for it, and two, it feels more convenient, especially if you like taking your favorite games on the go. Well, the wait is finally over because now we have Delta, and it doesn't require a loophole to work either. It's right there on the App Store free of charge. Basically, it is a successor to GBA for iOS, which, as the title suggests, could play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and of course Game Boy Advance games. But Delta ups the ante by also being able to play NES, Super NES, N64, and even DS games. I already have the app downloaded on my phone, and so far it plays like a dream. Granted, trying to play these games with a touchscreen is far from ideal, especially since I don't have a controller designed for iOS to make things easier. Plus, I already have a Steam Deck for emulation, but it's good to know it's there. But for how long is the question, because the very idea of emulation has had Nintendo foaming at the mouth for quite a while. Remember, this is the same company that had Dolphin cancel its Steam release and sue Yuzu into an oblivion. Now, you could argue that it was because Dolphin provided BIOS files rather than requiring users to use their own, and Yuzu was letting gamers know where to find ROMs via their Discord. But to me, this comes off as Nintendo trying to end emulation, period, which they see as a gateway to piracy. And I could understand that if it weren't for three things. One, in addition to the cost of collecting that I mentioned earlier, there's also functionality concerns. Trying to grab old copies of games in good condition can be very hit and miss, especially if you're on a low budget. Trust me, I know. I've collected games for a long time, in brick and mortar stores for a while before I eventually started going on Amazon and eBay. Sometimes I manage to find a game that runs perfectly, but then other times the cartridge has to be blown on several times, the disc has enough scratches to cause audio skipping, which is particularly irritating if you like having the music on, or, at worst, the cartridge or disc is in such bad shape that it's become unreadable. 2. A lot of games nowadays are digital only, and even if you do get a modern game physically, it's only a small amount of data on the disk, the rest requiring an internet connection to download patches and updates from a server that's going to be shut off at some point anyway. In other words, you can't own games anymore. 3. Nintendo is an absolute joke when it comes to game preservation. The Virtual Console days are long gone, and playing the classics on their terms requires a subscription to Nintendo Switch Online, and that will cost you $19.99 a year for individual or $34.99 a year for family just for the NES, Super NES, and Game Boy games. If you want to play Genesis, N64, or Game Boy Advance, you'll have to upgrade to the expansion pack, which will cost you $49.99 a year for individual or $79.99 a year for family. All that for a service that has no Final Fantasy, no Sonic the Hedgehog 3, no Chrono Trigger, no Pokemon Red and Blue, no Super Smash Bros., no Donkey Kong 64, no Conker's Bad Fur Day, no Wario Land 4, and no F-Zero GP Legend. It's also no secret that Nintendo is very draconian with what fans do with their IPs, and it's not just emulation. back in 2015, they introduced a Nintendo Creators Program where they basically wanted to control what YouTubers showed or said about their games while taking a portion of their ad revenue. And anyone trying to do Let's Plays of their games not part of the program would risk having their videos flagged or demonetized. Even though such videos are pretty much free advertising for Nintendo, but hail to the fuck no on that. Give us the money, bitch! Thankfully, the program ended in 2018, but that was far from the end for this company. They've also gone after fan projects, which had no intent to profit off of their name. So much so that there's an entire Wikipedia page about it. This includes fan games on GameJolt, a Metroid 2 remake, Pokemon fan games like Uranium and Prism, Mother 4, and Metroid Prime 2D, and there are plenty of others not mentioned on that page, including a 2D remake of Ocarina of Time, a Commodore 64 port of Super Mario Bros., an HD remake of Super Mario 64, and many, many more. Even a PDF scan of an obscure Japanese strategy guide for Super Mario 64, which had amazing artwork, wasn't safe from them. Oh, and quick update, they've also issued takedowns for 20 years worth of Nintendo related content on Gary's Mod as well, so add that to the list. All this anti-consumer bullshit is why my Switch has been collecting dust for well over a year now. They can release the Switch 2 next year and their fans will probably eat it up, and it'll probably help since by now the Switch has become more antiquated than America's gun laws. Will I buy the Switch 2? Probably to play the next Super Smash Bros. And Mario Kart, but will I be using Switch Online to play the classics on there? Absolutely not. I can emulate any retro game I want on my laptop, my Steam Deck, and now my iPhone. Nintendo Switch Online is like the Netflix of classic gaming, and like Netflix, it is an overpriced, overrated model that just isn't gonna cut it for me. So it makes me very happy to see Delta not only land on the App Store but also become, as I write this, the #1 free app on the platform. Nintendo can fight emulation all they want, but they must be on enough meth to kill a Snorlax if they think they can win. Emulation is like a hydra. Every time you chop one head off, two more grow in its place. It's the same fool's errand that record companies tried to run with MP3s back in the early 2000s. Napster and LimeWire may be gone, but there are still plenty of ways to get MP3s if you know where to look. And as long as there are dedicated gamers and preservationists, there will always be a way to play these old games. I obviously won't provide a link, but if you have an iPhone, definitely check out Delta while you can, cause Nintendo seriously needs to do better if they expect anyone to play their classic games on their terms. Until then, they can suck it. So until next time, peace.